Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Spiegel. I am a solitary knight of table number 55 of St. Louis, Missouri. I'd like to welcome all of you to the third Living History interview. I will be acting as your host today, along with Victoria Montoya.
Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Victoria Montoya, a solitary damsel of table 36 of New York City.
I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items before we begin. All of your computers should be muted at this time. At the end of the program, we will unmute everyone to allow greetings. During the program, please feel free to put any comments, questions, and greetings into the chat area. After the program, we will gather all the shared greetings and put them into a virtual gift for the Farbers. And lastly, at the end of the program, we will have an evaluation available to you by accessing the link found in the chat area. It is very important to us that you provide feedback so we can ensure that this program of interviews continues in the best way possible. And upon completion of your evaluation, you will receive a special picture from this event.
I would like to tell you a little bit more about this Living History project. This series of live interviews with sons and daughters whose contributions to the path have left a mark in Cafh were inspired by the interview that took place at the Initiate State event, and which made evident the interest to know more about the testimonies, experiences, and memories of these souls. Living History is intended not only to share these amazing stories, but to give us an opportunity to get us to know each other and integrate the vast diversity that composes the mystical body of Cafh. To carry out this project, a group of sons and daughters of all categories and different countries are volunteering, and this interview will be recorded to be shared later with subtitles in Spanish and Portuguese.
Today, we will be interviewing Master Dame Debora Farber and Master Knight Sergio Farber. The interviewers today will be Lourdes, who belongs to table number 2 of Ordained of the community in Yorktown, and Maristella, a member of the Seminary of Cafh in the United States. It is our pleasure now to give a very warm welcome to Debora and Sergio Farber.
Yes, indeed. Let me welcome you both. We are delighted to have you here today and to share this space with us. And we are going to jump right in and begin to orient the audience to who you are and a little bit of your history. So, if you could share with us, where were you born? Tell us a little bit about you and your families. And how did you meet? How old were you?
All right, we'll try.
I was born in Rosario, Argentina. Both my mother and my father were members of Cafh. My father, Abraham Gurfinkel, was very close to the Grandmaster Knight founder, Santiago Bovicio. And he was a founding member of Cafh in Rosario. He became Master Knight when I was very young. My mother, Reva Gurfinkel, was ordained in 1996 when she was 83 years old. I had a younger sister, Graciela, who also entered Cafh. And talking about our families, we will talk later a little bit about our families, but we have three children, Laura, Ron, and Ryan, and we have now grandchildren too, Christopher and Jessica. And our son-in-law is Tomas Lopez. So I grew up seen in my house and often talking with the sons and daughters of my father's table. And knowing that we had to be quiet and not make any noise when they were coming for reunions. When I was 12 years old, one day my mother sat with me and asked me if I would like to join a group of girls and participate in reunions as she and my dad did. And I was extremely happy. I immediately replied yes. And a couple of months later, on July 8th of 1950, so you get an idea of when I'm talking about, I joined a sponsor group that had been formed with daughters or young sisters of members of Cafh. Their ages were ranging between 12 and 15. That was my group. And after our reunions, the delegate of the table often came and took us to play ball to the park. But there he continued teaching us about the importance of being respectful to each other, obedient to the laws of the games that we were playing, and always ready to help those that needed help.
My turn. I was born in San Jose, that is 2 to 3 hours from Rosario. Depends on who is driving. I had an older sister and a brother, and my brother also became a member of Cafh. My parents moved to Rosario when I was 9 years old. There, eventually, I met Debora when we were 13. It has been a long time that we know each other, obviously. We were part of a group of children, kids, teenagers. And the reason of that is for us to have fun, to discuss a lot of issues, to listen to music, including classical music, which was unusual. And more than anything else, as important, we dance. But time went by, and eventually this kind of informal relationship with Debora became more formal. And when we were 18, we became what today we could call boyfriend, girlfriend. So, since 18, we were just kind of getting closer together. Debora had a remarkable liking for knitting. And so every Thursday, I used to accompany Debora to a place where they will practice knitting. I was kind of surprised, but I never asked anything about it. I was kind of, respecting this ability to do some wonderful things by knitting. Debora later on started to talk to me about spiritual things. And then I realized that that knitting class was something different. And eventually turned out to be a Cafh meeting. So after talking with Debora about these issues and about the spiritual life, and she offered to me if I wanted to join a group where this was going to be discussed at length. Then, and after a while, I was introduced again to Debora's father. He knew me, and he introduced me to another person. It's the usual way, the way that used to be the procedure to talk to aspirants. And I met this person, a wonderful individual, and we had several sessions. We talked, and we had, as usual, coffee, and we talk about many issues. We didn't mention the word Cafh. Remember, at the time, I'm talking about many years ago, we didn't talk about Cafh. We talked about spiritual things. Well, as a consequence of all of this, I got my questionnaire, I fill it out, I turn it in, and eventually I was coming to Cafh. And that was October 9 of 1958. I took my vow, and the one that did that was Master Nigel Finkel. And then, that was the way that started my life in Cafh.
When did you get married?
Aha, that's a secret, but we are going to tell you now.
When did we start?
Yeah, not married.
Oh, married. Well, we got married in Rosario on July 16 of 1960.
That is just only 60 years ago. I mean, just around the corner. No big deal.
And a few weeks later, we had the ceremony, the Cafh ceremony in Buenos Aires. Cafh had a very nice, beautiful house called by everyone Echeverria. And it was called like that because it was on the Echeverria Street. So we call it Echeverria. And in that house is where there were activities. And Don Santiago married us there. And after the ceremony, he told us two things. One thing was that we would be leaving the country, going up north, and we're not coming back to live in Argentina. We couldn't understand this at all. We heard this, but we didn't know what he was talking about. And second, he told us that we were going to have 3 kids, which we did.
Not following his directives, just have 3 kids.
Were you in college at the time?
Yeah, well, Debora, go ahead.
But
she likes to talk, no problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, we started in Rosario, and after we completed 2 years of college in the School of Biochemistry, we both received, of the university there, we both received fellowships to continue studying in Buenos Aires, in the University of Buenos Aires, which was a much better university. So we moved from Rosario to Buenos Aires, and this was in 1959. When we got to Buenos Aires, we called Master Knight Rodrigo. We were told that we had to call him. And he knew already from my father and from Don Santiago that we were moving to Buenos Aires, that we were there. So he told us where our reunions were going to be. Mine, I was a solitary maiden, and Sergio at that time was a sponsor page. So with this, we started another stage of our lives with new companions and new spiritual director. And I live with family that were from my father's side, uncle and aunt, and Sergio lived with a family that gave him room and board.
Thank you. We would also like to ask you some few questions about your experience with Don Santiago. You just mentioned him. And we will start with you, Debora. When did you meet Don Santiago?
Well, although I don't remember the exact date, what I remember was that I was going to Don Santiago's house very often, and in Rosario, of course, no? And I remember that I was carried on the shoulders of his son Joaquin, and I must have been about 2 years and a half by then, because my sister wasn't born yet, and then we were 2 years and a half apart. So I was a little bit less than 2 years and a half, or 2 years, around there. And Don Santiago lived 4 blocks from our house. So he came to our house almost every day. And if he didn't come, my father would go to his house because they were really very close. And on many occasions, my mom would invite him to stay for lunch because he was there. And at the table, I remember, he paid a lot of attention to everybody's stories or comments.
Let me add something here, very important for me, because I heard this from a very reliable source. You know, the time that Don Santiago used to go to their place, you know, the house of, you know, the Gurfinkels, it seems to be that he usually went there around noontime. And I think that, you know, from what the source mentioned to me, and I cannot verify this, is that he liked very much the way that Reba was cooking. And so he was almost sure that he will be invited for lunch. So just take this as a kind of, you know, gossip, but, you know, it was a really nice source that mentioned this to me.
And tell us also your impressions of Don Santiago and your memory. How was him, Debora?
Well, I just loved him. I call him Tío Santiago. Tío, you know, is uncle in English. He was always interested in what I was doing, what I did or I did not like, and in general, how things were going with me. I used to play with his kids when we went to his house, and Fina and Joaquin were quite a few years older than me, but Leo was about my sister's age. So I remember playing hide and go seek when we were about 5 or 6, my sister, Leo, and me. And years later, Don Santiago would ask me if what I was studying, what classes I would like to continue taking if I would go to the university. And we talk about nuclear physics, because at that time, I thought that I was going to continue studying nuclear physics. I like it a lot. And one day we were talking and he says, well, what about chemistry? And I liked chemistry also a lot. One thing that was interesting is that he never told me study chemistry. He told me, think about it. And I did. And the truth is that he influenced my decision to be a chemist, evidently, no, because I'm a chemist. So I will never forget that once I was in Echeverria, checking books in the library, because there was a beautiful library in Echeverria. And I had read the first book of Hilarión de Montenegro about the early years of Jesus, and was looking for the second volume. They were big volumes. And Don Santiago came and he said, what are you looking for? And I said, well, I explained to him about these books. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? Don't waste your time with that. If you want to know about Jesus, read the gospel. But don't read those books because they are several things that are a novel, like a story, but that were not like that. But why don't you say something?
It's my turn now.
I was just going to ask you,
Great.
what were your impressions of
Great.
Santiago, Sergio?
Equal rights, equal time somehow.
Absolutely.
Well, anyway, so once we moved to Buenos Aires, we began going to Echeverria very often. You know, that was a beautiful place. And it was there when I met Don Santiago for the first time at the son's ordination. You know, again, I'm speculating a little bit. He used to invite young people. And the reason, again, was not very clear, but became evident later on. You know, he was trying to see if some of us will have the vocation to go to the community. So we were really presented with these magnificent ceremonies, beautiful ceremonies of ordination and many of these sons were ordained in the community. After the ceremonies, we had a gathering, the usual approach, with very nice stuff prepared by sons and daughters. And one day, during one of these ordination and gathering, Don Santiago sat by me and we talked. And after we had this conversation, he wrote in a little card that I had by me the word ser, that means to be. And I have kept this card in my prayer book. And, very often, I look at this card and I'm trying to figure out exactly what he meant by that. And it's an amazing motivation issue for me to try to really be myself. The next time that we were together with Don Santiago, when was he married us? In the same place, in Echeverria. And the last time that I saw him was in June of 1962. He came to a full moon banquet of our table, our group. And during the toasts, he told all the sons present to remember that we were priests of our inner temple. This still resonates in my heart. And I kept it really very well guarded there because it's something very important, at least for me.
Well, following what Sergio said, I like to add one more thing.
Mhm.
The next day to the sons' banquet that Don Santiago went to visit with them, the daughters used to have the full moon ceremony gathering at tea time. We always did it at tea time. We didn't have the dinner. It was a tea. And in June of 1962, Don Santiago also came to our ceremony. And since it was close to the 25th anniversary of Cafh, during the toasts, he made the last one saying, "For another 25 years of Cafh, here or up there," pointing to the sky. Well, the ceremony went on, the tea went on, and there were all kinds of things that were said. And then it came time to leave. And so before leaving the house, he called me apart. And he said to me, "Your mom will celebrate 25 years of her joining Cafh on July 8th. And I will not be able to get her by phone to congratulate her. On that day, could you please call her and tell her that I love her and I wish her the best?" And as you may know, Don Santiago died on July 3rd of 1962, and this was precisely 5 days before my mom's anniversary. So I always have kept that. It really touched me tremendously.
I was wondering also, thank you for telling us those anecdotes. And I was wondering, having had such a powerful experience with Don Santiago, we were wondering, how do you remember the day Don Santiago died? How was it for both of you?
Okay, well, every time that we remember this, we had something going inside now. So both Debora and I were working in the laboratory, nothing new for that. And I received a call from Master Knight Rodrigo. He told me that Don Santiago had died in a car accident and that if it was possible for us, we could go to the community of Embalse to pay our last respects to our beloved Don Santiago. We were really devastated and we cried by this news. And immediately we left the lab left everything, went home, packed few things, and went to the bus station and traveled all night. And at the bus, left us the next morning at the gate of the community in Embalse, that's in Cordoba. We walked to the chapel where many sons and daughters were gathering in absolute silence. We remained there, and I cannot describe the feelings. It's very difficult to relate to that in words, but it was something very, very special and difficult, but at the same time, amazing. And after all this process, we went with everybody to the Alma Fuerte cemetery that was not far from the community where Don Santiago was placed to rest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for these very precious memories. Thank you for sharing these experiences. We were wondering if it's okay with you if we can move into asking you a little bit about moving to this country, moving to the US. And so we were wondering, what motivated you to come to the US? Did the situation in Argentina influence your decision? Did you speak in English?
All right, I'll take this first. While we were carrying out doctoral studies in the university, we asked Senor Jorge, the Grandmaster Knight II, if he thought that we could consider going somewhere outside Argentina for 2-3 years, a normal approach, to carry out postdoctoral work. It could be coming to the United States or somewhere else. We didn't have any preference. Senor Jorge told us, let's think about this. Now, this happened approximately 1 year before the political situation in Argentina became a real mess. And I'm being very careful with the words not to go, in extremes. At that time, we already had a baby girl, Laura, who was born on October 29 of 1965. So we started identifying areas of study that were interesting for us. And naturally, we started to look for contacts, which is a normal procedure to see if we could locate a place they will accept you. And that was an important issue. And one of these places was located in Boston. And the other two, one was in Northern California, the other one was in Southern California. Now, Senor Jorge thought that it was better for us to go to California. Now, coincidentally, and again, I'm using very carefully the words because it's probably much more different than coincidentally, a professor from University of California at Santa Barbara, Professor Banton, that was a friend of the professor with whom I did my thesis, was visiting our lab in early July of 1966. I had the opportunity to discuss with him the possibility of doing postdoctoral work, research actually, in his lab. Although Dr. Banton was very receptive to this request and told me that he would verify if he had enough funds to support me for at least 2 years, and promised to let me know as soon as he was going to be back in Santa Barbara. And he did. Dr. Banton told me that I could start sometime in January of 1967. He also said that he will be looking for a position for Debora. Your turn.
Okay, so it was July, and I have this date in my head, July 29th of 1966. That's when it happened. It was called, after it was called La Noche de los Bastones Largos, which means the night of the long batons. And that resulted in the university's closure. That evening, Sergio went to have his English class, and I was teaching undergraduate students in the laboratory. And later on, there was going to be a general assembly called by the chancellor of the university, because very many different problems that were affecting the university were going to be discussed. So after finishing with the lab, I wasn't feeling too well, and I decided to go home. So I asked some of our companions over there to tell Sergio when he was going to be back from his English class that I had left and I would not be at the assembly. And why don't you continue? Because
yeah, that's another issue that we experienced. I remember very clearly that I was coming back walking from my class. And as I was getting closer to the building where the university was located, I started to feel the effects of tear gas in my eyes, in my throat. And when I got to a corner across a distance from the university, what I saw was horrifying. I saw a double line of policemen using batons, hitting students that were pushed out from the building and into buses that later on took them to police stations. There they were fingerprinted, photographed, and eventually, after a while, released. Because of the distance, I couldn't determine exactly if Debora was there or not. And I was kind of desperate and very, very worried, thinking that Debora was maybe among them. But I could do nothing. Then, I decided to go home, and to my immense relief, I found Debora with Lori in her arms. There was no doubt after that in our minds that the Divine Mother was with us and had protected us. It was just simply unbelievable what happened then.
okay, so I will go on.
Yeah.
So after going over all that we had lived that day, it became evident that we needed to leave the country. The university was closed. And what were we going to do? We had to look for another place. So the next day, we talked to Senor Jorge. And we told him what had happened the night before. We told him also about an offer from Dr. Banton that had come the previous day. Everything was incredible. So we told him about that offer for coming to the United States to Santa Barbara, University of California at Santa Barbara. And if he agreed, we said that we were ready to emigrate to the United States. We were so impressed with all what we had lived the night before. So Senor Jorge was very supportive of this. And this, I think he was happy also because this would give us the opportunity of establishing Cafh in the west of the United States. Again, another thing, we were extremely fortunate that after our interview with the American consul in Buenos Aires, he approved our papers and we were able to pick up our visas in 1 week. And, on January 16, 1967, our family of 3 left Argentina.
For good.
For good. And we entered the US with already as permanent residents. They gave us everything to be permanent residents. And after a couple of weeks that we were in Santa Barbara, we receive the green cards. So things that don't happen that normally, no, but it
That
happened.
fast.
It happened to us. So regarding the other question that you asked, if what about the language? I knew English because while I was in Rosario, I was an English teacher at the American school. And Sergio was studying English and he could manage perfectly well. He was studying more, but he was already talking.
Yes, I talk.
So I was wondering, behind the issue of the language, how was it adapting to a new culture, a different culture?
Well, very interesting, no? Anyway, we left Argentina. We arrived at LAX, Los Angeles airport. And from there, we took another flight to Santa Barbara. And from there, we moved to Isla Vista. Isla Vista is the college town where the University of California, Santa Barbara is located. And remember that there was the time, hippie time, the time of the hippies in the United States. And they were making a profound impact in the US culture. Consequently, the environment was in reality very informal and not very difficult to adapt. Thinking carefully about this, it was fairly, I wouldn't say easy, but not very difficult. Let me tell you about my first experience. The next day that we arrived to Isla Vista, I decided to go to the laboratory to explore, what's going on there, to become familiar with everything there. And I used to do what I used to do in Argentina when I went to the laboratory. I put, a coat, a shirt, a tie, and my shoes. And when I walked into the lab, I was stunned because what I saw was very interesting. People were really strange, strangely way looking at me. And some of them were kind of holding kind of laughter. I felt a little bit embarrassed. But then when I looked carefully, I saw, the so-called hippie style shorts with holes. And, shirts were kind of funny with a lot of nice words that I cannot pronounce. And some of them were using lab coats. And on top of that, the secretary of my professor was using a long skirt, that was very peculiar, standing in the lab looking at me. Everybody were looking at me. So I tried to hide, but I couldn't. So what I did carefully, I removed my coat, removed my tie, and tried to cover myself with a lab coat. Lesson learned. The next day, I wear jeans, a sports shirt, and tennis shoes. So it was the fastest way to adapt to any environment. So, I went by my business and, they treated me in a fantastic way. They were very friendly and they showed me the way around. I had a big laboratory. And so I started to work there without any problem. Everybody wear thongs, that's, which is unusual. In a laboratory, you are not allowed to do that, but they could care less about that. So they were thongs. And it's remarkable the way that we face this as a kind of little shock with the culture at the time. Okay, but it was a fast learning experience.
Well, I did not work for a couple of months and got to know our neighbors, and I had to find what we were going to do with Lori because I needed somebody to take care of her if I was going to work. So our neighbors just across our house were a young couple that they had a little girl about the age, the similar age to Lori's. So the two girls would play for hours. We became good friends with them. And the girls were, we bought them the horses, and both of them, one in each horsey, they would go like this for long periods of time. We lived 1 block from the beach.
Oh, really amazing. No, what a sacrifice.
We were within walking distance from the laboratories. So our lives were simple, and we were in communication by mail with Senor Jorge and our families. So in April, I got a postdoctoral position at the university, and the wife of one of the students that was in Sergio's lab told me that she could babysit Lori, and she did, no?
They were from Chile.
Yes, they were from Chile. And Senor Jorge came to visit us 2 times while we were in Isla Vista. And in the second visit, he, with Senor David that came with him, helped us to move from Isla Vista to Monterey Park, that's close to Los Angeles. And this was at the end of 1968.
November.
November
1968.
No, November
Yeah.
1968, when we finished our postdoctoral fellowships.
I was wondering also, how did you have your reunions and took care of your daughter? And later on, I understand you have 2 more sons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I don't know if we took care of our daughter or our daughter took care of us. It's difficult to determine exactly, but let me tell you a little bit of this story. It happened with the laboratory. At the beginning, we started to meet at home, the 2 of us, better, the 3 of us. We came from the lab, changed our clothes, put a coat, a shirt, a tie, and shoes. This is the way that we used to have our meetings in Buenos Aires. And Lori was in the baby seat. She was 15 months old. We put her on top of the table where we are having our meetings, and we had the meetings. Now, I'm going to make a claim that I cannot verify exactly, but Lori was the youngest individual joining a group in the history of the United States, Cafh in the United States. So if anybody has a different proof of that, please let me know, but I'm convinced of that. There's no other example like that yet.
And she was an angel.
She was an angel.
She
really
behaved so well. She didn't say a word. She sat there. She was looking at us. We were doing the meditation. We were giving the teaching, and nothing. She was in perfect silence. It was incredible.
Now, Lori has another claim that she was even younger. She is probably the youngest person to attend a retreat outside the stability radius when she was 3 months old. So Debora took her to Embalse, and Señorita Debora and the daughters there took care of Lori. And she doesn't remember that, but it's better for her to know this. So, okay. When the other 2 kids came, we used to wait for them to go to sleep before having our meetings, obviously. And there was no other way to do it. Okay.
Thank you. This is very interesting. We would be curious to know about your experiences trying to find aspirants.
Yeah, but let me tell you one thing that I think would be good before we talk about the aspirants.
Sure.
One thing that I remember, Senor Jorge came several times to visit us at Monterey Park when we were living in Monterey Park, and he was coming piloting the Aero Commander aircraft that he had.
He was an absolutely fantastic pilot.
And he would come from Argentina, making stops, and come to visit us, leave the airplane in the airport.
In the Van Nuys airport. He was stopping in all the countries where sons and daughters were there. So it was a kind of a long trek, but it was fantastic, to have him coming fairly often and staying in Monterey Park. Yeah. Really helping us and doing some other things, obviously.
So we used to drive him, to different places because he wanted to find a place where to found a community. And so he we went different places in Southern California. We also did a long trip to Mount Shasta in Northern California, searching for a place. And coming back from one of those trips, we shared with Senor Jorge that some friends of us that had come to the United States from Argentina too and were living in Montebello, that is a city close to Monterey Park, were going to sell the house that they had. And he became very interested in seeing the area and the location of the house. So we continued driving to Montebello. And to make the long story short, Senor Jorge purchased the house, and two ordained daughters, Senorita Joan Clark and Senorita Alicia Ramon, emigrated to the USA to live there. So with them, Senor Jorge founded the first community of daughters in the United States. And this was in March, and I think it was March 6th, because 3 days after he had founded the
before.
table.
3 days before, March 3rd, 1969.
Ours was found on March 3rd. So it was, he founded it 3 days later.
Yes.
In 1669.
Yeah, we founded this solitary table in March the 3rd of 1969.
Yeah.
That was the start of Cafh in the West Coast. Also, we used to drive a lot with Senor Jorge. He really liked to know places, visit different areas, and with the interest of knowing the area, but also looking for a place for the community. Mm. On one of those trips, we passed close to Wildomar. And Senor Jorge made the comment that it could be an interesting place to consider for locating the community. Again, to make a long story short, because we could go into details here, Senor Jorge purchased a property in Wildomar where the current daughters community is located, and the house in Montebello was sold at the time. Now I think Debora could talk about the aspirants.
Okay, so my first experience took place, well, I will tell you, we were used to talk to aspirants because we in Buenos Aires still, before coming to the United States, we were looking for aspirants. So my first experience with aspirants was just 1 year. After 1 year, I had entered Cafh, and I was in first year of high school. And I became friends with a companion in the class with whom I shared that I had that I was in a group of girls interested in getting to know more about ourselves and what things we had to do to change things that we didn't like in ourselves and how we could help others, etc. And these ideas resonated with her. And so I very quickly called Don Santiago and told him about this. And he told me, well, your friend is only 13 years old, and she would need to involve her parents for getting permission to join Cafh. So I think that the best thing to do is to wait until she gets to be around 18 to continue talking about the subject. So I was very concerned how I was going to tell this girl that, she couldn't come to our group. But you know what happened? Coincidentally, her father was working in Rosario, and a couple in the next week or so, he got a promotion to move to Buenos Aires. So in 2 weeks, they were gone. I was very sorry because she was my friend, but I didn't need to tell her anything about these things. So, okay, we kept on going, and then we moved to Buenos Aires, we told you. And when we were in Buenos Aires, I remember
15 years later.
this was quite a bit later, no? About 10, 15 years later. And I remembered her. I still remember her. We were 13, but you know. So I look in the directory for the name of the company that I had heard. She told me that her father was getting the position in, and I called the company. And believe it or not, I found the father there. He came and talked to me. And the next day we were together, my friend and I were together. And we met and we chat and at length about all kinds of things. And that same day, I said, remember, I still have a group. We are not 12 to 15 now. We are in our early 20s, but if you would want to come, you have to just tell me and maybe you can do it. So, okay, she told me, of course I won't. I never forgot that, she said. And so I heard some years ago at one of the full moon assemblies that she was a solitary dame in the table of Buenos Aires. So, you know, this is how things happen. So that was my first experience. Then when we came, I will talk a little bit more. When we came to the USA, we took advantage of what we had learned in Argentina, of course. And when I was in the lab, that I told you I started a little bit later than Sergio, an undergraduate student came to the lab and she wanted to work there. So I was with her. And so we became friends. And so I talked to her about Cafh, and she graduated and she followed us from Isla Vista to Monterey Park. She moved to Monterey Park. And we had, like we were saying, Senor Jorge founded the Table of Solitaries on 1969. And a few weeks later that she moved here, because she followed us, she came to Monterey Park and she was in Monterey Park. And a few weeks later, she entered Cafh. So, okay, so now, that is...
You forgot to mention probably that we had some experience in Buenos Aires to find aspirants. You know, we could claim up to 10, maybe many more, but we were trying to figure out. We forgot some of the names, you know, between daughters and sons. And, you know, we had some experience, but, you know, it's different, the experience that we had in Buenos Aires in relationship to what we have here in the United States.
Well, I have one more, no?
Yeah, you could continue.
No problem. Only one more.
That's all right.
I started to work at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in November of 1971. But the laboratory wasn't in UCLA, was in a hospital, in a veterans hospital that was 40 miles from our house. But I was lucky that I got to be in a lab, again in the lab. So over there, I met Jerry Prober and we became friends. And after a few months, I started to share with her the ideas of Cafh. And that winter, my parents had come to visit us from Argentina, and Jerry invited all our family to her home. And at that time, we met Walter, Jerry's husband, and after a while, we were all talking and answering questions about Cafh at that evening. And both Master Dame Jerry and Master Knight Walter entered Cafh in October of that year, 1972 it was, in the sponsored table of Los Angeles that had been founded by Senor Jorge in 1971.
Thank you.
Okay, I could add a little bit more if you'll allow me. You know, it's probably okay. No, is that all right? Yeah, sure. Okay. So as both the solitary and the sponsored tables began to grow with sons and daughters that came from other countries or some cities in the United States, we started to organize monthly activities at our home. Activities are not the creation of the latest times. Remember we were, many, many years ago, we had activities. And we call these activities new challenges for a new world. They were lecture series that were given by us and by the sons and daughters, where they really made the experience of being able to expose ideas, present ideas. Uh-oh. No, not available windows. Something happened here.
Oh, we're okay. We can still hear you.
Yes, we can see you.
Something happened. I'm not sure. I don't see anything, anybody.
We see you and we can hear you.
Not available windows. Anyway, we will continue.
All right.
And so the issue is that we had a lot of things going on those activities. And it was really good because in many occasions, we have up to 30 or 40 participants on that. And, it was a dialogue that followed the lecture, and then we have a gathering with refreshments. And it was very good. We didn't have too many aspirants out of that, but it was an important experience to organize activities and to meet people that were interested in spiritual ideas, not necessarily, meeting, getting into Cafh, but really searching for spiritual things. And that was probably the thing that we liked it the best. One other thing that I like to mention, that also we had activities that we organized in the in San Diego, in the University of California library. And as a consequence of that, we met two couples, and with them, we founded another table of sponsor in San Diego area, in a little town called Escondido. And we used to go there every Wednesday, and we did it for 5 consecutive years, driving for around 2 hours, 100 and plus miles one way, and coming back. We used to drive after dinner, around 6:37 to get there on time for the meetings. Unfortunately, because the problem of labor and work for these individuals was such that they had to leave the area, and as a consequence of that, the table became inactive. Now, there is something else that I'd like to share with you. 2 sons of Cafh work at different times in Debora's lab. And one of them, Michael Danziger, after many years in the solitary table, was admitted to the Cafh seminary. Soon after, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. He became very sick, and he was terminal. He was in his home with hospice care. At that time, and at his request, the Grand Master Knight, Señor José Luis, authorized that he could give the vow of renunciation. He was in bed. We were around him praying, and then we removed his oxygen mask. And because he lost his sight as a consequence of the disease, I read for him the vow, and he repeated. And this is how he became, by all means, unordained. Later on, days later, he passed away. It's something that it was for me for us, all of us who were around, an extraordinary event, a powerful manifestation of what is the commitment of a soul, the renunciation, the ability to disappear, to become nothing really. The most important thing for him was to be closer to the Divine Mother. This is something that it still makes us very emotional, and it's hard for us to forget. I don't know how to recover this.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I will say something else. Yeah, you try to recover this.
I'm not sure.
We don't see anything.
We're still okay, just so you know. We can still see you and hear you perfectly, just so you know.
Okay,
great.
so in 2012, we also, we bought a place in Alhambra, which is a city close to Los Angeles, we wanted to have a Cafh center. Oh,
That's it. Magic.
Got it back.
And there we had reunions, we had retreats and ceremonies and we also had activities that give us the opportunity of offering our path to possible aspirants. So I just added that, and now you can ask us more questions.
Yes, we would like to ask you some questions about your experience on the path of Cafh. How do you think influence your personal life, your family life, your professional life?
Well, okay, Cafh has influenced my personal life from the moment I gave my first vow. At that time, I identified myself with the ideas, with the method, and with all that I learned. And I can tell you that it continues to be the same today. I love to attend the reunions, to read and study the teachings, and to have spiritual direction. This is my life.
Well, 2 years after I entered Cafh, we got married. So my personal life in Cafh became my married life. You know, I couldn't separate this. It's one life. And for both of us, it has been an extraordinary experience, a transforming experience. Being together in this road allow us to have a more meaningful relationship, understanding, respecting each other, and supporting each other. Of course, we made mistakes, plenty, and I'm not going to tell you them. But it's really something that we have determined very carefully in our life, because we were able to share, to listen with our heart, with an open heart. Maybe this was the secret that allowed us to be together for so many years. It's an open secret now. We always respected our individual characteristics. I think that is also important too. You know, we have created room between the two of us. Each one of us are individuals, and we respect each other from that point of view. And that allows us to be together in a different way also. The ideas of Cafh also nurture, without any question in our mind, the relationship that we have with our children. And then they could, you know, you could ask them what they think, but you know, this is what we believe very definitely.
You know, now that you are talking about our children, we took the three of them since they were 2 until, well, Lori was a little bit later when she started, but Ronnie and Ryan, since they were 2 until they started kindergarten, to the daycare run by the señoritas in Montebello. And of course, there they received education and lots of love. And I, you know, from the ordained daughters, I will tell you one funny story. This is something that I always remember. One day, Señorita Paulette, who was in Montebello, shared with me that Ronnie had got on top of one of the little tables, and from there, he recited the complete prayer that he heard me repeat every day when I was driving him to the daycare. But not only he recited it, he was trying to teach it to the other little kids, making them repeat what he was saying, I think that I never forgot that.
That's great.
So regarding my professional life, it was definitely influenced by my identification with the ideas of Cafh. There's no doubt about that. In all the aspects of my work, I work in a hospital for 36 years, a big hospital with more than 900 beds. And I had the duty to interact with patients, with physicians, with colleagues, with workers. I had the responsibility of 60 persons to deal with. And I learned how to communicate, how to listen, how to interact. You know, it was an extraordinary experience because of the difficult situation that we had to face in the hospital. It was an extraordinary experience, no doubt about that. And I really honed very carefully what I learned from Cafh and applied there as much as I could, especially when my open door in my office, people used to come to talk to me, not about technical issues, but about problems in their lives. And I learned to listen very carefully, not just to be able to tell them anything. They just wanted me to listen to them. That's it.
And I can say something very similar. I have been working at UCLA. I'm still working at UCLA for 49 years on eye research, trying to find cures for different eye diseases. And so a deep sense of service to people has been inspired in me by Cafh ideas.
You know, a few minutes ago, you both talked about the experience with Michael and witnessing his renunciation as a soul. And we were wondering if, were there any other souls in Cafh who left a deep mark within you?
All right, I'll take it. For me, there are three individuals. You know, it's difficult to select, okay? But you are asking the question and trying to answer the best that I could. One of them was Senor Lázaro Hidekel. He was an ordained from the community that for many years was our spiritual director in the USA. The other person was Master Nigel Finkel, and the other person was ordained Dame Reva Gurfinkel. At the time that when we left Argentina, I mentioned to my spiritual director there that I was ready to become an ordained to take the vow of renunciation. That was something that was almost a duty, something that I felt strongly that if we are going to offer our life to do something in that state and to found Cafh there, if it's possible, I should become an ordained. Here, I worked with Senor Lázaro for many years, and he really helped me to become an ordained. And that happened in 1975, 8 years later. And that was necessary, obviously, for me to grasp somehow the real meaning of what is an ordained, what is the meaning of becoming an ordained. And I'm still working on it.
For me, I was just thinking, no? For me.
Well, I like to finish. Come on.
Well, finish.
I have to talk about Master Nigel Finkel, you know, this is why she didn't let me do it. No, he was, you know, they moved to the United States, I think in 1980. This is, you know, something they were going to say. But, you know, we were two ordains. And obviously, you know, the Grandmaster Knight told us, why don't you get your meetings together? And that was a treat, I can tell you. He was amazing. And as I remember him, for instance, I thought that I knew meditation and I practiced that. But doing the meditations with him and listening to him, I learned to do the meditation in a completely different way. That was giving me freedom to express, to relate in a way that was amazing. Many different ways to do it. Someday I'm going to tell you. The same goes, you know, with both, with the affective and the discursive. And sometimes we practice other kind of meditation. When I listened to him giving the teaching, he was a fantastic orator. Again, the meaning of the teaching became different. You know, it was a profound sense of participation there, that he was not talking about what the teaching said only, but his own experience applying the teachings in his life. So I learned tremendously from him, and I really miss him. And how about ordained Reba? I was the spiritual director of her. I gave her personal, orientation, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you call it spiritual direction, orientation, or whatever, counseling. What I learned from her was the amazing, clear understanding of her relationship with me, the humility that she expressed, but the real humility, not, the humility that sometimes we are not liking very much. It was genuine. He was an amazing, loving, she was an amazing, loving person. And she lived with us for 10 years when she passed away here in our home. And I learned continuously from her the ability to live life fully. She was 102 years old when she passed away. Now your turn.
Well, for me, the people that left marks were, in first place, my father, and of course Don Santiago, and also the Grandmaster Knights, Señor Jorge and Jose Luis. Since I was little, I had a very special connection with my father. So in addition to being my father, he was my friend, he was my teacher. I always told him everything that was happening to me. And he listened in silence. And he allowed me to say how I felt, what I wanted, and what I thought or needed. Our relationship continued being like that. Even when I was not even living anymore at home, I would call him, or when I was married, I would still have my father to tell him things.
I was not jealous about that.
And, and even when I had my children of my own, I always felt so close to him. In fact, after retiring, my father and my mother came to live with us. It was 1980, and they moved to the United States to be with us. They lived about 10 minutes from our home, and we were always in touch. So I also wanted to take the vow of renunciation early in my life, but there was no way to do it except if you were going to the community, but I was happily married. So I had to wait until the tables of ordained that live in their private residences were created by Señor Jorge. And I became an ordained in 1933 in a ceremony that Master Dame Jerry shared with me. So at that time, there was no seminary. So okay. That's it. Well, that's okay. That's okay. So
I don't know if this is getting too long.
Or you want us to continue? I can tell you a couple of other things.
Well, we need another 2-3 hours, but it's up to you. Whatever.
A couple of things. No, that's not
sure.
Better.
Yeah.
Something.
Okay, well.
No, just tell us really,
No.
Maristela, and.
Sure. I think your experience is great to hear. We'd love to hear more. We have like a couple more questions, perhaps after that.
Why don't you ask the questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Lourdes, I think it's your turn.
Yes. A few minutes ago, you told us about your experience with aspirants at the beginning when you arrived here to the United States. And I was wondering how was before and how you see it different now. Something that brought before sons and daughters to Cafh.
Okay, well, I think that what brings people to Cafh, why that it's the personal contact with the souls what helps to bring people to Cafh. That's what I believe. getting souls to come to Cafh is not a matter of before or now. It has to do with what you have to offer and how you do it. If people see how you live, how you communicate, how you listen to them, how you always try to help in whatever is needed, I think that this opens the door to start conversations about Cafh. As you know, technology is extremely useful to expand the ideas of Cafh. For example, with the dialogues we are doing or meditation classes that we are having. But I believe that the personal contact with the souls, whenever possible, is the best way to find the souls predestined for Cafh. Like last year, I met a beautiful soul that is working with a colleague of mine at UCLA. And this person entered Cafh a few months later. So she wouldn't have gone to the dialogues or to other things. It was because we got together that she entered Cafh.
Well, this is still, for us to decide, to find, because I don't think that we have yet discovered the best way, the right way or best approach to contact souls. Communication is essential, and any system that we could feel that works for us is good. So I don't think that we have to determine if personal contacts or not is the best. It depends on how we relate to that. And I will definitely emphasize the use of technology. I think, especially nowadays, it's God's saving grace that we have this ability. And it's working very well, in my opinion, with the dialogues. I think that, we are developing, I think Jerry's involved in this, a class for, meditation. I think that there are many, many alternatives that I think will be very important for us to explore. It's necessary to adapt to the times that we are living in. And there's no question about that. It's not a matter of what happened before and what is going to happen now, but we have to determine what is the real situation here and now and see what it works for us. It's really up to us. As Debora said, it's important our relationship with the idea. How do we feel about that? When we share things, if we just simply do not back up what we are saying with our experience, what we are going to provide just simply are empty words. And that doesn't work very well. So let's reflect on that, and as we are doing, which way is best for each one of us, but let's not waste the opportunity to practice it. Otherwise, again, we are going to go with ideas and generic things, but doing not very many things about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And maybe as a follow-up to that question, in terms of your perception of our spiritual path, share with us, how would you like to see the future of Cafh in the US?
Let me get the crystal ball here. I have it someplace. I couldn't find it. Maybe it's lost in the corner here. I'll tell you later on.
Well, we are optimistic about the future of Cafh in the United States and in the world. We think that the most important things that all of us need to learn is how to communicate our ideas to others in a simple and respectful manner, bringing them up in a very positive but not aggressive way that allows space for discussion and to develop the ability to listen carefully, to listen with the heart that we are being told to do. So we give an opportunity to others to share how we think and how they think. In this way, we can build bridges together.
There's a lot to be talk about this. There are many, many things. These are very difficult times for all of us in the world of Cafh, everywhere. And so we have to learn to deal with it. So we are lately talking a lot about change. And I don't think that we have to be afraid of change. If we don't believe in change, don't look at the mirror, because that will tell you right away what is the meaning of change, okay? So I think that the important thing for me from this point of view, let's be judicious about change, avoiding not to fall into extreme positions. I used to talk about the pendulum effect. Oh, and that's exactly what is the meaning. You know, we go from one extreme to the other most of the time. The idea is hopefully that we could reduce the oscillation of the pendulum of the extremes and try to move a little bit more to the center, to have an equilibrium situation, an opportunity to be able to listen all that we have to say. There's no question that we have to be open and tell what we feel about things, but also be ready to compromise, to reach consensus, and to work with the Grandmaster Dame, to work together. We are going to achieve this together. Otherwise, we will not go anywhere. We are going to have controversial situations, opposite ideas, and nothing will happen. On the contrary, we could damage really this expression of this extraordinarily beautiful divine idea that we have, that we call Cafh. And I think that we have to be conscientious about it. We have to be conscious about this, be aware of what we are doing and what is that we want to do. You know, we cannot impose our ideas. We are not the owners of the truth. Believe me, we are not. And if we could claim that and believe that what we are saying is what the way it should be, then we are creating a real problem for all of us. So I think that we have to feel free to express what we think, honestly, with the intention that is the right intention to contribute to achieving what we are trying to achieve that is essential for us. And we have to determine what is essential. And if we compromise and we try to reach consensus, we are going to be very successful. This is why we are very optimistic about this. We believe that the sons and daughters of Cafh are capable to do this. And I'm absolutely convinced that we will achieve that.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing with us so many anecdotes, so many experiences through all your life. But before finishing this dialogue, we were wondering if you want to add something more.
Well, obviously, we are delightful, and even though that we were kind of scared to participate on these things.
Delighted, not
Oh, delighted. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. She's correcting my English. Anyway, because she does this all the time. She's a teacher, okay? English teacher. Anyway, so, I got used to that and I have no problem. So I'm very happy, and honored. I think that Debora will express that eventually, that we were invited to participate. It's not easy to share everything. We have done, for all purposes, almost complete, not complete, retrospective examination of our life. We have to review everything from beginning to now. And it was extremely helpful that we put things in the right position. We began to forget about dates and issues and kind of overlap in a way that we couldn't separate them. It was an unusual, great experience. And we are also very grateful to all of you for the participation and the team that worked to put together this, and the two persons that did the questioning. That's great.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
No, that's okay. Say it again.
That I think that we have to give our special thanks to Maristela and Lourdes for the wonderful way in which you conducted the interview. And thank you to every one of you that listened and spent this hour with us.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Maybe this is a treat. No pun intended, but it's a treat, to be with you guys today. And maybe we can just wrap up at this part of the interview. But again, I'm really grateful, for you sharing this beautiful experience of your life and your experience in Cafh with us. And maybe we can bring back now Steve and Victoria for the final closing.
Thank you, Maristela. The Grandmaster Dame was able to join us this afternoon, but she left earlier. So I would like to read a message she left for Debora and Sergio.
Oh.
Dear Sergio and Debora, I'm sorry I have to go. I want to tell you that I really enjoyed your interesting experiences and all the learning that you did in your fruitful life. It is inspiring. A big hug for each of you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, a really nice time today. Well, first of all, let's thank the Divine Mother for allowing us to be together here today. We thank Debora and Sergio for their time, openness, and sharing with us a little bit of their life experiences. I would also like to personally thank them for their many years of friendship and accompaniment in this path of Cafh. We also want to thank the Grandmaster Dame, whose support made this project possible, as well as a team that have volunteered their energy, time, and knowledge to bring us together in this moment.
We'd like to thank you all for your attendance, your presence, and interest. Remember, Living History will be continued with monthly interviews. And we'd like to remind you that please fill out the very important feedback form that you'll find the link in the chat. And if you haven't gotten anything for the Farbers, this is the moment to do it. We'll be collecting these to make a special virtual gift for them. Thank you all.